Oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. After 9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost, with a 38% increase in homelessness and 1/4 of Canadians skipping meals because of a lack of money. The Bloc voted for $500 billion in centralizing and inflationary spending to add to the another 100,000 public servants and doubling consulting spending. They said they had no choice because the government was going to shut down otherwise. Can the government inform the Bloc that this spending would have been adopted with the NDP regardless of how the Bloc voted? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I find this question somewhat hypocritical because the Conservative Party is talking about homelessness, but in their program and plans, this word doesn't even exist. I find it hypocritical of a party that voted in this House against all the measures that could have given homes to Canadians. And I think that, Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party needs to look at what the real intentions of the Conservative Party are with respect to the fight against homelessness. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. The Prime Minister doubled the national debt, hiked taxes and inflation, saying that all this money would fund programs, generous programs, to eliminate homelessness. Since then, homelessness has risen by 38%, and 25% of Canadians skip meals because they don't have enough money. It's not because, with the support of the Bloc, the government it's spending all the money of Canadians. Why is the Bloc Liberal coalition forcing Canadians to feed this obese government rather than allowing them to feed Canadian families? The Honourable Minister of Economic Development. Mr. Speaker, it's so hypocritical. This party voted against the school food program. So when we're talking about feeding Canadians, let's start with children, and they're voting against it. When they say, yes, people are asking for money, we're giving them help. There's the child benefit, they're voting against it. And when we say we're going to help Canadians to have roofs over their head and pay their rent, they vote against it. Mr. Speaker, make up your mind. Do you want to help Canadians or cut their services?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After 9 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the homelessness and hunger. He doubled the debt, increased taxes, and caused inflation, but said it was all to fund generous programs that would end homelessness. Well, homelessness is now up 38%, and 1/4 of Canadians are skipping meals because they can't afford them. That's because his greedy government is consuming everything Canadians earn. Why is the NDP and Liberals forcing Canadians to feed this morbidly obese government instead of feeding their families?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from the Conservatives who purport to care about poverty and Canadians when every single time they vote against those supports, $10-a-day childcare, early learning and childhood education. They're not supporting our budgetary measures to put food in school lunch boxes for 400,000 children, Mr. Speaker. It's unbelievable that they will at one hand say they support Canadians and on the other hand vote against those supports every single time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I'm grateful that the member points out that we have voted against every single policy that has caused homelessness to rise by 38%. We have voted against every single inflationary policy that has forced 1/4 of Canadians to skip meals because they can't afford a meal on their table. Mr. Speaker, the government has doubled the debt, increased inflation, and blocked home building. Why is it that they force Canadians to feed this morbidly obese government rather than feeding their families?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, our government is actually focused on keeping inflation low so that interest rates can come down. And I will note that inflation has come down below the targeted range of 3%. And at the same time, Mr. Speaker, we have Budget 2024. We have supports for renters. We have supports for affordable housing. We have a national school food program on the table, Mr. Speaker, and we will continue to support Canadians with dental, with early childhood education, all the while the Conservatives vote against. Mr. Speaker, there's no plan on that side of the House. We will support.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
She repeats the same costly promises the Prime Minister has been breaking for 9 years. Mr. Speaker, in a 6-week period, 50 homeless encampments have opened in Toronto. Let that sink in. There are a total of 256 tent cities in Toronto alone.
Oh my goodness.
It wasn't like this before this Prime Minister, and it won't be like this after he's gone. Will he admit that everything is broken after 9 years of his government?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Of course, Mr. Speaker, when that member was a minister and had responsibility for housing, that there were more than 2 million more Canadians living in poverty. And the number of times that he talked about vulnerable people or taking action to help homeless, 0. He wants to hold out to people in a time of difficulty across the world that the solution is to cut the programs they need, to take away dental care, to take away pharmacare, and shame on him for it. We will stand up for vulnerable people in a way he never has.